when you're being driven to have to be some way in order to prove something or disprove something about yourself, there is no freedom to explore.
Right.
There's no freedom to explore the question, what do I really want? Because you have to get the answer right. And you have to make sure it fits into this pattern of how you get value as a man in the world and all of this stuff, which is all crap. It's just all crap.
Yep.
Because you have a compass built in. It's built in. It comes with the hardware.
Yep.
That points you in the direction to your answer to this question of what is meaningful to me, what is important to me. And yes, to access it, you have to give yourself permission to let go of all these pictures you have of how you're supposed to be, so you can get connected to what gives you joy, what gives you inspiration, what gives you true desire.
Welcome to Gap to Gig, the show for dads navigating the in-between season when work, identity, and priorities start asking different questions. Here we talk about what that season looks like and how to move through with intention. I'm your host, Michael Jacobs, and today's guest is Andrew Poles. Andrew knows what it feels like to carry everything at once. He started his first business at 23 as a single dad, working 70 to 80-hour weeks just to keep things alive, all while trying to be present for his daughter. Over time, he built and led multiple businesses, coached more than 10,000 founders and leaders, and worked with teams at places like NASA, Dell, and Netflix. But what makes Andrew's perspective different is this. He learned the hard way that grinding harder doesn't actually solve the problem. Learning how to lead does. Today, he helps founders make the shift from doing everything themselves to building businesses that grow through people without burning out in the process. Andrew, I'm really excited to chat with you. Welcome to the show. Glad you're here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Michael.
Appreciate that. Thank you. So I want to start back at the beginning because your story as a single dad, building your first business, feels like the foundation for everything that came after. Take me back to 23 if you can, and starting your first business as a single dad. What did trying to make it work actually look like day to day for you?
Well, I started that first business because I was in a PhD program at University of Texas at Austin, where I live now in Austin, when I found out I was going to become a dad, and that was unplanned, and it was coming into my life through a relationship that wasn't going well. So I was living with my girlfriend at the time, trying to be a stepdad, and she had a daughter from a previous marriage, and I really loved her, but I was lying to her and lying to myself that I was ready to be a dad, and I was afraid to tell the truth because I thought it would cost me the relationship, which obviously it would have. And so a lot of the trouble we had, not all of it, came from that. So that's kind of where I was in life. That's as much authenticity as I had. That's as much honesty as I had at that time of my life when I found out that I was going to become a dad, and it was never part of my plan to be a dad. So I didn't have life set up for that. I was in graduate school. I was working 2 jobs. I had my teaching job, and then I had a carpentry job on the side where I made some money just to make ends meet. And so when I found out I was going to be a dad, I asked my boss at my side hustle, I'm like, hey, if I come to work for you full time, can I bring my daughter to work? Because I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to see this child?
Right.
Since I'm not going to be in a relationship with her mom, and she's going to be breastfeeding, and I'm going to have her just whenever her mom can kind of like need me to take her. How am I ever going to see her in her first couple of years of life?
Right.
And so my boss said, absolutely not. You cannot bring her here. And so I'm like, okay, there's no jobs in philosophy in Austin. I'm like, how am I going to do this? That's why I started my own business in large part, was because I thought if I had my own business, then no one could tell me you can't bring her to work.
Right.
And so what it looked like was I had her strapped onto me some of the time when I was at work. And so my company at that time was in retail, and my business partner and I built and sold both solid wood case goods, and also I did custom design work as well for our company. So we had this line of furniture, but I did custom work. So I designed that. So I would go I would get, be up with my daughter in the morning, and then either bring her with me to work or take her back to her mom's. And I would go into my store, I'd open it up. I'd be in there for 8 or 9 hours on the retail floor selling furniture. And then if I didn't have my daughter after work, I would shut down the retail shop. I would go into the wood shop, and I'd be building, furniture with my business partner into the night. And then I would go home and eat something and go to bed and do the whole thing all over again. And eventually I found someone to work the weekends for me, where when I had my daughter for like an overnight and I could have her for a whole day, I could have someone else watch the store every once in a while, so that I wouldn't have to just make my daughter sit through 8 hours of retail when she was 1 or 2, which, there was not enough to entertain her there.
Right.
And I just kind of made it work that way for about 5 or 6 years.
Oh, wow.
And then when my daughter got to be that age, it just struck me, I am struggling so hard to make this business work. And the truth is that I don't even want this business. I didn't love the business. I didn't love the work. It was just the one thing that I knew
Yep.
how to make money with when I was in school.
Right.
And so I shut down the business and went and got a job. Once my daughter, and I was in, kindergarten, and she could go to school during the day and I could have a regular job. But that's how it started. That was the first 5 years of her life.
Wow.
So from about 24 to 29, that's what life looked like.
Wow. That's got to be a very challenging experience, fulfilling, I'm sure, but also the challenge of how do you sustain that day to day of,
Yeah.
you've got these two important things to you. Obviously, your daughter being the probably the singular most important thing, and then but you also have to support her, support yourself, and so you need
Right.
to work. And so that must have been a challenge to just kind of also remember yourself too, right? Like, because at some point you have to take care of yourself, and even when you didn't have your daughter and the shop was closed, you said you were, building, designing more furniture. So it's like it was almost nonstop. Where do you think in that period of time, that season of life, where do you think you were getting it right? And where do you think you were realizing that maybe this wasn't, maybe you're digging yourself into a hole that you don't want to get into?
I think one of the things that I was getting right at that time was I was very thoughtful about how I wanted to parent. I was very scared of parenting an infant, and that was very stressful for me because although I had a lot of experience with young children, I had zero experience with infants. And so the early years of her life scared me. So I started studying actually. And that's what I knew. I was a student, right? That's what I knew how to do. So I actually took some early childhood development classes at UT as while I was in my other courses, and I read books about how do you deal with those stages in life where children are pushing the boundaries of their own power versus your attempts to exercise, control. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but to prevent them from, hurting themselves
Right.
and all that stuff. So I think one of the things I got right was I was just really thoughtful about how I wanted to
Yeah.
parent. And I did my best to be the kind of dad I wanted to be. But what undermined that to a large extent was, and this is one of the things that I don't know that I said I got it wrong, but it's one of those things I would look back on now and say, okay, I learned that lesson. At the time, I needed to go through that to be able to be the person I became today. So I wouldn't change it if I could go back because I don't know how that would play out. And I really am grateful for having gone through that difficult time. But so with that caveat, one of the things I quote got wrong was that it was all driven by fear.
Mhm.
I was afraid, I was more afraid to fail as a father and to provide for my family than I was inspired to build something meaningful for my family. And the fear won. And as a function of the fear winning, it was making a lot of my decisions for me about what to say yes to, what to say no to. It made it difficult for me to be present with my daughter when I did have her because I was so afraid of that kind of scepter hanging over my shoulder of, okay, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. You need to get back into the store. You need to go and make sure that the sales are happening, that kind of thing. I would leave family vacations sometimes when there was a cash crisis, and I would leave my daughter with my parents and my fiance and fly back by myself to go rescue the business, and I missed out on really important family time. And it was all about the fear that was driving me. Again, a fear not to fail.
Yeah.
And underneath that fear was an unresolved relationship or belief I had about myself, that I was going to screw something up. It was all going to be my fault. That kind of that loop that ran in the background for me. So that would be the biggest thing I think I got wrong was, and again, I wouldn't really call it that, but to use your framing, the thing that I hadn't learned yet at the age of 23, 24, 25, 29, 35, maybe even 40 was the lie contained in the fear.
Yeah.
And how damaging it is to use that as a source of fuel.
So profound that I think a lot of dads, I know for sure myself, have been driven by fear, right? It
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
so easy for fear to take control of the situation. But something you said that stood out to me was you didn't know until you experienced it, right? Like you
Yeah.
had to live it
Yeah.
to know that. And it is so it's easier to what they say, like 2020 hindsight is 2020. Like you can get perfect vision looking back and like, yes, I can look back at like how I was in my 20s and like what I could have done differently. It's very easy
Right.
now than it was then of like what,
Right.
in the moment, how do you, not get driven by fear and instead driven by the things that really matter to you. And I
Right.
appreciate how you are so straightforward about, yeah, could I have done things differently? Did fear make some decisions for me? Did it, you know, do I regret certain decisions? Sure. But that was, you don't know those things until you experience them. And
Right.
you, you still look forward. You still, you know, after that stage of your life, you've built, and we'll get into some of that of like what you've built. You've built a lot and you've had a lot of success. Even still, like as you get older, like myself in my 40s, I'm sure fear still dictates some of the decisions I make. It's really difficult to shake that, right? And I
Yeah.
think that,
Yeah.
you know, for you, some of that fear was like you felt like you had to grind, you had to work in that moment. And the way you knew how to work was to do this retail business. And I think a lot of dads, whether it's a retail job or it's just a job that they have with an employer or whatever it may be, or maybe it's their own business that they're running, they feel that that grind is still necessary, right?
Yeah.
And it's difficult to break through why that grind is necessary. I'm curious, like, how do you help someone tell a difference between a season of hard work? Because there are times where we're just going to have to, you know, put our hands down and just be like, this is what I need to do, and a pattern that's kind of costing them more than it's worth.
So my approach to this challenge is to look at it through 2 or 3 distinct lenses that I think all, or if not lenses, just 2 or 3 different, maybe like levers you can pull on to try to pull apart the challenge that it is.
Sure.
So one layer or level of the challenge of overworking or of grinding, and maybe it isn't overworking, but it is grinding. In other words, you're working a lot of hours and maybe more than you would like to, ideally, is to get at the emotional drivers of that wherever those are at play. And they're almost certainly at play with people because no one gets through their childhood unscathed by these kinds of adaptations we come up with to be successful in the world that come with a huge cost. Like no one gets away without that, no matter how great your parents were, or no matter how horrible your parents were, if you want to say it that way. And I can say this from experience. I mean, having worked with so many people and knowing some who had just great parents, it's just part of the human condition that you come through childhood and adolescence and early adulthood with these adaptations, these compensations, right? In my case, my case was hypervigilance. It's this sense that the other shoe's going to drop at any minute. I'm going to lose something. I'm never going to get it back. So there's going to be some amount of emotional and cognitive looping that is driving this behavior that you want to get at.
Right.
And that is gotten at for most people through some kind of modality. And that modality might be therapy or coaching, or it could be plant medicine or something like that. But you're going to need something to help you see your own eyeballs. And it's very challenging to do that.
Right.
So that's a piece of it. When you've dismantled that piece, when you've gotten unhooked from the dry that piece is, then you can look into the situation and situationally begin to assess with more clarity. Hey, like in order to make this thing that I've invested myself in work, what is that going to take? And with businesses, if you are a business leader, this is a slightly different equation than if you are an employee of someone else's business, even if you're in a position of leadership. So, in other words, not a business leader, but a business owner. If you have your own business, this is a slightly different equation, especially if it's new than if you work for an established business owned by someone else.
Right.
So you have to be able to look into the circumstances and say, what does success in this role really require? And sometimes that does include some seasons of working really hard and long hours. For example, many of my clients are first time founders of Silicon Valley style startups where money is being invested either by the founders and or friends and family or angels in the beginning, and then eventually maybe even institutional capital. So the game of that kind of business is to make as much progress as you possibly can with a product or service that you don't even know out of the gate whether the one you're envisioning is going to be the one the market responds to. So there's a lot of learning, a lot of iterating that has to happen quickly for the least amount of money as you can spend.
Right.
And that just winds up coming out of people's time. I mean, there's just part of the deal to make that equation work. You have to work a lot. So sometimes it's circumstantial. But even then, there's this other component. So you take the fear out of it and you have the circumstantial component. And the third piece of this is, and that's why I said like 2 or 3 lenses. Most people are insufficiently strategic about how they allocate time and manage time. And to be a little bit more specific about that, just if you think about your life and all of the parts of your life like a project, like say building a house.
Yep.
So I used to be a general contractor at one point in my life, and I built really kind of high-end custom homes. So every time was different and super high expectations and lots of very entitled people involved in difficult situations.
Sure.
And in order to do that well, I had to build the whole house in my mind before I took any actions to start building the house. And then I had to build it backwards from, okay, if I'm promising to deliver the house on this day, then I have to have the final inspection by this day.
Right.
And to get the final inspection by this day, I need these things in by this day. And I have to build out a schedule backwards. So I'd have to think from the end point of where I wanted to land. And then I have to plan it backwards to the present moment and say, okay, here's how I'm going to get there. People really need to be that thoughtful about their time. And they almost never are.
Yep.
And so they take the opposite approach, which is they jump into the present moment to try to get as much done as they can with whatever they can get their arms around, with very little thinking, very little strategy involved in how they're allocating that time. And that almost always leads to unnecessary overworking and this lingering sense that no matter how much you got done, you never got enough done.
Right.
So that's the third piece. So just to review and kind of wrap that all up, because I know that was long-winded, there's almost always an emotional piece you got to deal with.
Yep.
So that you can see and think clearly. Then you have to look into your situation and see what does it require. And inside of that, you may have to make certain balances or compromises or get creative so that you can spread your time out with your family and your health and your business and all those things. But then thirdly, you want to learn how to be masterful with time. And that's a skill set most people don't have.
Right.
And it's one you can easily acquire through lots of different kinds of courses. And then you can really get yourself to a place where you can say, even though there's way more to do than I have time to do every single day of my life, I'm going to say, because of the strategy I'm following here, that when I get to this point, that's done for today. And that is 100% done. It's complete. This day is good. I can move on with no guilt, no worry, because everything else I got to get done has a time somewhere in the future where I'm going to do it as well.
Right.
And that's a huge tactical piece of this question you're asking.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because obviously it's difficult to make the wisest decisions when emotions are involved, right? So like you said, you got to strip out the emotion of it, because naturally we're human. So we're going to have emotions about it.
100%.
Right? Positive, negative, we might be super excited about this thing we're starting, right? But then, so we dive head on into it and then realize, wait, it's not exactly what I wanted to do. I want to do something else. And then you jump to another way. You kind of just, you're letting your emotions kind of dictate which direction you go, which is not necessarily the most productive. But the other end of that spectrum, it's like, okay, when you strip out the emotion, you can recognize that time is a finite resource, right?
Correct.
As far as we know, we have one life to live, and we only have so many hours in the day, so many days in the year, and so many years in our lives. So how do we best or most effectively use that time? And that may mean like you have to hand stuff off to others. You might need to automate something. You might need to rely on somebody else to get some step of that down. But that's hard to do, especially when you are thinking of yourself as a leader, right? Of like, hey, I am building houses. Like I should, this is my project. This is my thing. Like I expect this to get done to my standards. So I know what that is. So I'm the one that has to do it. And so I think a lot of guys, like they tie their value to being the one who gets it done, right? Because it's
Yes.
their thing.
Yes. Yes.
And they're it becomes part of their identity of like, I have to get this done. Like that is who I
Well
am.
said.
But
Well said.
you like, I think from what you're saying is that you have to unwind all of that, right? You have to take away, you have to kind of pull apart the different threads that what you think make up your identity of like, this is my project, this is what I need to get done, and say, okay, what is actually important to me? And that is my time, that is the people around me that are most important to me, my family, my friends, whoever it may be, whatever else it is important to you, whatever causes, whatever it is that makes you feel good and feel like you're living a life that you want. But the trick is figuring out how do you unwind that without feeling
Yeah.
like you're letting people down.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how do you start to unwind your identity when it's so wrapped up in what you're
Right.
trying to accomplish or getting things done? How do you unwind that so you're not letting people
Yeah.
down, not letting yourself down?
Great question. Really, I love this question. So, since this is a show that, really is primarily pointed at dads, I'm going to lean on that a little bit for
Sure.
my answer to this. So, I cannot emphasize enough what a difficult moment in the history of humanity this is for men. Because if you think about the way gender roles have played out over time, even in the way that our brains and our eyes between men and women have evolved differently. Men, for example, better able to detect motion, women with more color perception. So, in terms of hunting versus gathering, men's bodies are designed to be better at detecting motion, explosive power, things like that for hunting and protecting. Women's eyes for discerning this is poisonous, this is not poisonous. And so they're just over the course of human history, there have been these gender roles that we've played. And for a large part, especially in the last 100 and 200, couple hundred years or whatever in the West, beyond that even, but it's like from industrial times forward, men's role was to go out and provide for their family. So our social sense of identity and value, and that's the key thing, our social sense of value was tied to our ability to provide and protect.
Yep.
But if you look right now in history, men are needed least right now for providing and protecting than they have ever been.
Yep.
And so women don't need men to provide and protect them the way that they used to. Women can go out and provide for themselves.
Yep.
If that's what they want to do.
Right.
And so this is a bit of an identity crisis for men because it's unclear, I think, for many, especially young men today, like, what is my value? If I'm heterosexual and a man and I'm looking at relationships with women and I'm like, if this woman doesn't need me to protect her or provide for her, like, what is my role? What is my social value? Right. So that is an important caveat of this. But I want to go a level deeper than that. I just want to pinpoint that because I think some men may actually resonate with that idea and find themselves in that question without having a great answer for it. But that's why I want to go one level deeper. One level deeper for you dads out there, and then for any non-dads who are listening to this, you can relate to this in whatever way. If maybe you're a mom or maybe you're a man who doesn't yet have children or whatever role you find yourself in what I'm saying through whatever you can analogize through, maybe a sibling or who has children or whatever. But when you have kids and you watch your kids in the world in their first 5-6 years of life, what you see is that it's the Garden of Eden. They're just in life. For themselves, they're not good kids or bad kids. They don't have to be this way or that way. They can want to be a doctor one day, and they can want to be, maybe their mom is a CEO, so they want to be like mom. They want to be a CEO, and they walk around in mom's high heels saying, you do this and you do this because that's what they see mom doing at work. And then, like whatever, like there's literally no sense of anything being good or bad, right or wrong about themselves.
Right.
And then if you watch, that will change as they go from 5, usually 5, 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. they start to get this sense that they're good or they're bad, and they start to adapt their personalities to try to be the way they think they need to be. So, for your question about how do you unravel, how do you untangle this? Whatever way you get there, whether it's through coaching or through therapy or through plant medicine or through studying or through listening to podcasts, at some point, what you have to do is walk back to your own experience of yourself at a time in life when you were still in that Garden of Eden, so to speak. If you just watch children, I mean, that's the way it is. Like, they're just like in life, and they're just super happy until they start to get this sense of what it is to be a good person or a bad person and do some right and wrong. And then they start tweaking themselves and they leave that experience of grace. So in my way of thinking about this, what we have to do as men is we have to actually find a way to reconnect with an experience of ourself.
Yeah.
The same way we experience our children when we first meet them in this world. That there is nothing good or bad about them. There is nothing right or wrong about them. They are just freaking perfect.
Yeah.
They are just a perfect being. And there is nothing they could ever do that will ever change you seeing them that way. Now, you might not like their choices. You might, punish them for some of their choices. You might want to try to shape how they're living their life. You might be upset with some of the choices they make and all these things. But at the heart of who they are, they will always be that perfect soul for you. And so that love between a parent and a child that the child gets born into, ideally, is something that we all have to learn as adults to provide for ourselves. So it was provided for us, hopefully by our parents and our home of origin. But whether it was or whether it wasn't, it doesn't matter. As an adult, you have to learn how to provide that for yourself so that you can literally see yourself at the heart of who you are as whole and complete and perfect. And when you can do that, then you can start to deal with unwinding all of the mechanism you've built around those moments in life where you decided something was wrong with you or whatever. You can start to unwind that, but you've got to get to that place. And this is not like, a lifetime of Buddhist contemplation. I'm not talking about that. This doesn't have to take a lifetime.
Right.
It can happen very quickly, but you have to do it.
Yep. And I imagine that
makes sense.
It does. And I think the way I if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, is that you have to give yourself permission, right? That is kind of the first step to explore, to allow yourself to figure out what really matters to you. This, first, 5-6 years of life that you're talking about, then, roaming the Garden of Eden and just kind of one day you want to do this thing, the next day you want to do that thing. To me, that's exploration, right? We don't know what we don't know yet. We haven't had these experiences. We just need to explore and experience what there is in life to be offered to us, and then allow ourselves, give ourselves permission to be like, okay, that's what matters to me. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. I like the way you said that. I like that because, I know in one of your most recent episodes, you brought up this question of like, how do I know what I want? And the person you were interviewing, I think it was the pianist. Anyway, his name escapes me. But Anthony, he was talking about how that question is deceptively difficult. Like, it seems like it's an easy question to answer, but it's actually quite difficult. But what I want to say about this thing you're saying is that it's permission you're giving yourself to explore, right? When you're being driven to have to be some way in order to prove something or disprove something about yourself, there is no freedom to explore.
Right.
There's no freedom to explore the question, what do I really want? Because you have to get the answer right. And you have to make sure it fits into this pattern of how you get value as a man in the world and all of this stuff, which is all crap. It's just all crap.
Yep.
Because you have a compass built in. It's built in. It comes with the hardware.
Yep.
That points you in the direction to your answer to this question of what is meaningful to me, what is important to me. And yes, to access it, you have to give yourself permission to let go of all these pictures you have of how you're supposed to be, so you can get connected to what gives you joy, what gives you inspiration, what gives you true desire.
Right.
And when people tell me like, I don't really know what I want, So then the place to begin is, can you experience the want of wanting to know the answer to the question? Like, do you really want to know what it is that would turn you on? People are like, yes, I really want to know what would make me happy. And there it is right there. That's the compass.
Right.
You see, that is built in. That desire to know what would make me happy is the same compass as, oh, music brings me joy, or this brings me joy. So the first piece of this is, so we're on the question of like, how do you know what to use as your North Star, right? To build this meaningful life. We're talking about where you're not forced to grind all the time, just to keep the through line
Right.
here. So getting connected to what you want is always just like one simple step away. Because when you don't know the answer to what you want, you do know that you want to know. And that will contribute to the emotion of wanting.
Yeah.
And that's the first step. Okay. So then the second piece of that, once you let yourself get connected to that, is just to change the question. Don't try to answer the question of like, what do I want my life to be about? Or what is the right life for me to live, or whatever. Just answer the question, what's the right next thing to check out? And all you have to do is follow your curiosity and or your joy.
Right.
Like, well, I don't know. It just really gives me joy to go play pickup basketball with buddies, once a week. Great. Go do that. And just notice like what's joyful about that for you. Is it the camaraderie? Is it the competition? Is it the physical exercise? What brings you joy? Or I just love watching this particular show. What is it about the show? Like, it's right there. So I want to demystify this for people. Like, it's freaking built in. You are not broken. Mostly people just ask too difficult of a question. And you really can trust that. And this can help you navigate this question about like, how much do I work and how much time do I spend with my family? Because if you're stuck in these pictures of how you're supposed to be as a man.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm supposed to be making all this money, providing all the stuff for my family, but also now in this modern age, I'm supposed to be there all the time and coach all the sports and do all the things. And when all you have is the way you're supposed to be, how you should be, you can't freaking get to the bottom of how do you want to be?
Right.
Because that is a solvable challenge, even when there are conflicts of like, I can't be in two places at once or whatever. Yeah, that stuff happens and you have to make choices. But you can actually work all that stuff out when you're not in some like prescribed picture based on a standard called a should for how to be a dad. When you're like, well, what do my kids really need from me? What do I want from them? Like, my dad worked a lot. He was a sole provider for 3 kids. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a physician working in a new practice, and he just worked all the time, but he came home for dinner and then he went back to work. And on the weekends, he wasn't on call. He played sports with us. My experience as a kid was that he was never gone.
Right.
His experience as a dad was that he was never there. But as a kid, I felt his love for me. I never felt outside the bubble of his love for me because somehow as a little kid, it registered for me the fact that he came home for dinner before he went back to work. His love was present for me.
Yeah.
So it's not the way men think it is.
Right.
And if you can just get outside that prison of should, then you can start really being creative around, this is meaningful to me. This is meaningful to me. This is meaningful to my kids. So I want to keep that in the picture, etc. It doesn't have to be an intractable question.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to unpack here too. It's like, what is screaming out to me right now is I see this as like an open and closed switch, right? And it's so easy for us, particularly as dads, to get into a rhythm, get into, this is how our day-to-day is. This is what I should be doing. And
Right.
so we kind of close off opportunity. We say, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is the path I know. So it's easy to stick to that path. Change is hard. So I'm going to close off, even if I'm feeling under stress, I'm going to close off my optionality. I'm going to only look at this is what I should be doing just to get me through this. Right. And so I'm always closed. I'm always closed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All I have to do is strip away that should, take away the emotion, strip away the shoulds, and be like, what actually means something to me? What is,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what you said was, you have to take it one step at a time. Right. And to open yourself up, you have to be like, okay, what is the first thing I can do?
Yeah.
Right. And it's easy when you're so busy, between work and home and whatever social commitments you have, to put aside the things that are going to make you happy and healthy in the long run. And
Right.
it is so difficult then to give yourself that permission, give yourself that time to say, okay, is this really what I want to be doing? Is this how I want to be spending my time? Is this what I want
Right.
to do?
Right.
As opposed to being like, yeah, this is what I need to do. So I'm just going to keep doing this. We
Yeah.
stay so
Yeah.
close minded
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
every now and again, it's okay to open up that switch and be like, yeah, maybe I should look at this from a different lens.
I think dads have an advantage here because over men who I guess if you don't have kids, you don't have that pull as well to be there for your kids. So you don't have that challenge. But I think the men have an advantage in this one sense of who are dads confronting this is because if you think about that, children learn way more from who you're being
Yep.
than what you say matters,
Yep.
right? And they get way more about life from how you feel about your life than what you say about it.
Right.
I promise you. Parents think they can like hide things from their children. That if they're in an unhappy marriage, they can hide that. That if they're unhappy in life, they can hide that by smiling and being joyful with their kids. You cannot. Human beings are not made that way. Human beings are empathetic, neurologically wired that way. We read each other's feelings. We read each other's space, emotional space. You can't hide what's there
Right.
by changing your face or by putting on a tone of voice that's not a match for what you're feeling.
Right.
So if you think of it this way, dads, if you're not enjoying your life, if you're experiencing lots of regret, if you're experiencing a deadness, and you're doing it for what for you are good reasons, noble reasons. Like I'm doing this, I'm making the sacrifice because it will benefit my family. Okay. Ask yourself this question. Do I want my daughter, my son to have the experience of life for the rest of their life that I'm having in mind? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, then don't give them that model.
Yep.
Real freaking simple. Because they are picking up what you are putting down emotionally.
Yep.
Ontologically, not what you're saying.
That's right.
So if you want your children to have a joyful life, a meaningful life, there is the best way you're going to give that to them is do that.
Yep.
Is really confront that. And I think that gives dads an extra motivation to really do the looking and the real like reckoning with ourselves. What is important to me? What would give me a meaningful life? Because it isn't just being homeless. I want to provide for my family. I want to feel like I'm taking care of them, but I don't want to do it at the expense of my joy. So how do I work that out? And then go to work on that. Don't just give up and sacrifice your joy for financial security because you're teaching your children to live the exact same life. They just will inherit that from you.
Yes. If I give you a standing ovation right now, I would. I think you're exactly right that kids follow actions. Actions speak louder than words, right? And
Yeah, and emotions speak louder than
right.
actions.
And emotions and actions, to me at least, I think are intertwined, right? So it's
Yes.
like your
Yes.
actions and your emotions, it's very hard to show one action while feeling the opposite emotion, right? I think it's the emotion that you're in is going to drive your action. So yes, emotions usurp actions, but I think they also control your actions. So
Yeah.
to me, like
Yep.
what you demonstrate for your kids is shown through how you show up, not what you say,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And it is in the moment, it is so difficult to see that, right? As when I'm overwhelmed with work and home life and whatever else might be going on, around me, it's difficult to remember like, yeah, I could keep telling my kids this is the right thing to do. But if I'm not doing that or I'm doing the opposite of that, they're going to follow that lead. They're not going to follow what I said
Right.
because words are hollow. Like they
Yeah.
are just words. And
Right.
it's like I'm
Right.
giving them like a workbook, like, okay, this today's lesson is, do X, Y, and Z, and here's how you do it. This is how you should do it, and this is how you should live your life. That's not how life
Yeah.
works. Life works through
Yeah.
experience, right?
Right.
Whether you're a kid or
Right.
you're an adult,
Right.
like you said early on, like you didn't know what you didn't know because you hadn't experienced it before. And then what
Yeah.
you live through the running a retail shop, building your own furniture, and raising your daughter all at the same time. right? Those are lessons you had to learn through experience. It wasn't like somebody, I know you said you took classes, but they couldn't tell you like this is what's going to happen on
No.
Thursday, 4 o'clock when you're
Right.
exhausted because you've already worked 40 hours this week and there's still more time to go, right?
Right.
And your daughter is getting hungry and tired and you don't close the store for another 2 hours. Like, what do you do? Like,
Right.
you don't know that until you experience it. Right? You give your
Yeah.
kids some of these experiences. I'm not saying you should put your kids to work for 40 hours, right? At the age
Right.
of 4, but
Yeah.
like you can start to show them through your own experiences and allow them to participate in experiences to understand what is meaningful to you in life, what you hope to provide to them going forward in terms of living a meaningful life, living a full life, a happy life, whatever it may be that you want for your kids.
And I think one thing we can add to that, if I may,
Please.
is also the other thing that we can do as dads for our kids is to train, especially our sons, but our daughters too, what strength looks like in a world of emotional honesty. Because a lot of the social and cultural images of strength from men involve a lack of emotionality.
Right.
And that's not real and it's not healthy.
Yep.
And so, I was a big proponent, and as I said, like I did a lot of thoughtful parenting. So one of the things I did in parenting my daughter was I shared my struggles with her, and often when she was old enough to have an opinion, I would ask her her opinion.
Yep.
So I would say, oh, like for example, I remember this one time I said, "Oh, Ileana, I am so upset with myself right now. I don't know what to do." I said, "I lied to a customer at work today because I was afraid to tell them the truth, and now I just can't live with myself. But if I go back and tell them the truth, I'm afraid they're gonna fire me from the job. I feel like I've really screwed this whole thing up, and I don't know what to do. I'm so embarrassed that I lied." I was just in the moment, it just came out of my mouth. I was so nervous. I was like, "What do you think I should do?" And just to show our kids, we don't have all the answers,
Right.
and we have struggles. And we wanna be good people, and sometimes we do things that we're not proud of, and we have to go clean them up, and it's okay. It's okay to be human.
Absolutely.
It's okay, right? And I think that builds a different kind of strength, the kind of strength that comes from authenticity
Yeah.
and vulnerability.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think what I love about that is not only are you demonstrating radical honesty or just honesty in general, right?
Yeah,
Your with your child, but also you're involving them in the conversation, which is giving
yeah,
them a new sense of confidence. Like
yeah,
somebody who is further along in life, trusts what I have to say, values what I have to say, is willing to listen, right? That gives them a confidence to then start to build their own foundation of what is meaningful to them, right? It's like, okay, if
yeah,
I can think on my own, like my opinions do
yes,
matter. And that is so important, I think, for kids, especially in the society that they're growing up in today, where everything is out there on social media. And it's so easy to be like, oh, that person, they live such a glamorous life. I'll never be able to do that, right? Right.
totally.
That doesn't matter. First of all, they're probably projecting. They're not actually what they're posting online is probably not 100% honest or truthful, but it doesn't matter because if you have the confidence in yourself that you can lead a productive life, a happy life, a meaningful, fulfilling life, doesn't matter what everybody else thinks.
Correct.
That is to me one of the best gifts you can give to a child is to give them the confidence to know that they can achieve what they want to achieve. And
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what anybody else has achieved. They they're only in control of their own life, not anybody else's, right?
well said.
And
Yeah, with building from joy versus building from lack, building from love versus building from fear. They're both forms of building, but one of them, regardless of the outcome, just brings you more joy, growth. And the other one just comes with a very, very, very high cost. And it's completely unnecessary because the fear is a lie.
yeah,
It's just always a lie. It's just the fear we have of failing, that people are going to think this or that about ourselves, or that we'll never be able to redeem ourselves if we have a business failure or this or that. It's all just a lie. And the ultimate lie isn't that what you think is going to happen isn't going to happen. Some people might judge you, and some people might not hire you or whatever. But the bigger lie is that you could do something to damage your intrinsic worth as a human being by succeeding or failing. And it doesn't work that
Right.
way. And we believe that it does. And that's the lie that gets us in trouble. And if I could just leave, the dads and well, all the people listening with that one thing is kind of going full circle about what did I get wrong and what did I learn? There's nothing you can ever do in your life that will add to or take away anything from the majesty of your being, of your soul.
Yep.
It's not the way it
That's right.
works. You can learn, you can evolve, but you can't diminish what you are. What you were for your parents, the first moment they held you is still the center of the center of who you are. And so the big lie that leads to all the fear is that somehow that thing that you are, that you and I are, that we all are, is somehow broken or is somehow bad or is somehow not enough. That is all a lie. And, if you can give up that lie, then it's so much more available to you to build a meaningful life. And by that, I don't mean all the stuff you have. I mean, the whole journey,
Right.
even the struggles, right? To just be like, wow, this is amazing. This sucked and it's amazing. So I'll get off my soapbox. I really wanted to put an exclamation point on that one.
I appreciate that. Before we get into the speed run, I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
When with so much going on and we're trying to figure out some of these philosophical questions in our lives of like what what is meaningful for me and how do I kind of strip away some of that emotion so I can start to think a little bit more clearly or look at things a little bit more clearly. Those are things you can do at any time, right? It's not like you have to wait to start doing them, right? It's
Yeah.
you just have to make the time to start doing that. But I think a lot of dads I talk to, they feel overwhelmed. There's just always so much going on, right? There's kids have
Correct. Yeah.
activities, kids have to be here, they have to do that. I've got to show up for this. I've got to, run these errands, and I've got to do this job. I've got to do these different things. And I still want to, have a social life and all these different things. I'm curious what your take is on like what can a dad do this week to just create a little more space, a little more presence for themselves or for their loved ones without waiting to make some big life change. Like what's something they can do right now?
Okay. So one thing that they can do right now is operate from the principle that you can't give away what you do not have, right? So if your cup is empty, you got nothing to give.
Yep.
And so what does that mean practically? Practically speaking, that exercise where you're given a bunch of rocks, pebbles, and sand, you have to make it all fit in a jar.
Mhm.
And the best way to do that is you have to put the rocks in first
Right.
and get in the rocks in whatever way they'll fit. And then you have to put the pebbles in, shake the jar.
Yep.
And make the pebbles move their way around the rocks. And you put the sand in, you shake the jar, and the sand moves around everything else, right? And that's how you get the maximum amount in a jar. So the rocks of your life have to go in your calendar first. And the rocks need to include what you need to refill your cup. Goes in first. So your kids' activities, okay, but maybe it's some amount of rest. Maybe it's some amount of alone time because you recharge when you're alone, or it's exercise or whatever it is. Those have got to go in first, and then you make the pebbles move around the rocks. And people do it the other way. They put the sand in the jar first, and then the pebbles, and then they try to shove the rocks in, and they can't get them in because the whole jar's already full of sand,
Yeah.
right? So one practical thing that you can do is you got to put the rocks in first, and one of the rocks has got to be, your cup has to be as full as possible for you to give as much as you are capable of giving to your job, to your kids, to your spouse. So what are those key things for you? Is it your diet has to be on point? Your sleep has to be on point. You need some amount of exercise, and put that in your calendar first and then work around that.
I love that. That is so useful. It's a great reframing of like, remember like what is most important to you. I like how it's a visual metaphor that is very simple to grasp of like the big things have to go in first. The sand can kind of just keep filling in the cracks the more you move it. So you can keep adjusting your schedule. Just because you put all the rocks in first doesn't mean you can't move a rock later in your schedule from Tuesday at 8 to Wednesday at 3. Like things move. That's okay. It's just a matter of identifying what is most important. Get those things down first, then move on to the next thing. Here is, step 1, step 2, step 3. Like do it in order of importance. Figure out what matters most, what is going to recharge yourself. I love that. It's so practical, which is in completely contrary to the speed round, which is completely unpractical. 5 quick
Great.
questions for you. Starting
Awesome.
with, what's the first kid show theme song that comes to mind?
Uh, what is it? Teenage Shark. Da, 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 da,
Oh,
da, da,
the
da, da.
Baby Shark? Is that
Baby Shark,
Baby
Baby
Shark? Yeah.
Shark. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's gonna be stuck in everyone's.
I always comes out. I mind Jamie Tart because I think of
Oh, from Ted Lasso.
from Ted
Yeah.
Lasso. So I always forget the actual
Yes.
original.
The new season this summer, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your very first job?
So that would be after I shut down I guess my first job would have been teaching in graduate school, but my first job outside of school was when I shut down my cabinet shop. I started in a sales role with more than half my salary on commissions only, selling custom cabinets to builders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Would you rather spend 24 hours with a toddler-sized T-Rex or a T-Rex-sized toddler?
A toddler-sized
Why is
T-Rex.
that?
Because I couldn't keep the T-Rex-sized toddler from killing itself by doing something foolish. It's too big. That would be
Yeah,
horrible.
good point. Good point. What's your go-to karaoke song and the one you would sing if you had to?
Pretty much anything from James Taylor, because A, I love his music, and B, we have the same range.
Excellent. Excellent. And finally, what's the weirdest thing you've ever carried around in your bag, briefcase, or pockets?
Weirdest thing?
Yeah.
Maybe uh, my costume for Halloween in 2024, I think it was. I finally got the courage to dress up as Dr. Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror Picture Show when he does the big time warp scene and he's in the pearl necklace and the garters and the high heels shoes and everything. I always thought Tim Curry was such a bomb for doing that
Yeah.
role. And I'm like, one of these days I'm going to have the courage to do that. So I went out and bought some 6-inch stiletto heels, like size 15 or whatever it was in women's shoes, right? I bought the wig. I went to Sephora. I got my whole face done up in makeup like he did in the movie. And I had the bustier and the whole thing. And so, yeah, I had that whole costume put together. And then when I finally put it on and went out for Halloween, I was so self-conscious, but I was proud of myself for having the
Yeah.
courage to go out that way.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Before we wrap up, Andrew, I want to make sure you point people in the direction of, for anyone listening who's thinking like, I need to make this shift, like I need to take this next
Yeah.
step. Where should they go to learn more about your work or to connect with you?
2 best places to go are my website, andrewpoles.com, where you can read my blogs, you can read what my business is about and send me messages. And then LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter there. So you can just look me up at linkedin.in/andrewpoles and read my work and connect with me there.
Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes for sure. Andrew, I really appreciate this conversation. You brought a level of honesty to a lot of difficult conversation, right? It's not something that we as dads often have the language to express of like, this is what I really want to be doing. This is what I need to be doing. This is how I refill my cup. And you do it in a way that is sustainable and is practical. And I appreciate the honesty you brought forward of like that you weren't, everything didn't always go perfectly. Right. And
Right.
sometimes
Yeah.
you have to adapt and you don't know what you don't know until you experience it. And the way you kind of break things down from doing everything to what's actually important and useful to you was so practical. And I appreciate you chatting with me today. So thank you so much for joining me. And finally, before you go, if you're a dad listening to this and you find yourself in between navigating a season that feels different, head to gap2gig.com, subscribe to the Gap to Gig newsletter. It comes out every Friday and it's a quieter space to reflect on work, life, and what really matters right now. If this conversation resonated, please consider sending it to another dad who might need to hear it. Until next time, I'm Michael Jacobs. Thanks for showing up and listening to Gap to Gig.